Where's Teddy? Oh,
All right, welcome to meeting number 9, guys. It's been 9 meetings already.
Okay, we're so
wow.
I think we only have like 4 more meetings, or is it 3 more meetings?
maybe 3 more meetings and the party, Netflix party.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So if you guys have any suggestions for what we should watch for our very last meeting of the year, I think it's the 17th of December. We're just gonna do like a fun movie, so it doesn't need to be deep or anything. All right, so we don't have a lot of people here today, very sadly, but we'll do intros, we'll have our little discussion, and then we have announcements at the end. And I'll probably leave a little bit early because I have to get ready for my exam. So wait, let me just make Tia the host. Does it keep me from recording?
No, make me co-host.
Oh.
Or should I?
Wait, I think it's fine.
It's recording on my end, or it shows me that it's recording.
I'm recording as well. Okay, sorry. This is really dumb. Okay, so we'll just go around and do intros. I can start. My name's Lucia. I'm a junior studying neuroscience, and I'm calling from Ann Arbor. And we don't have a fun question today because I forgot to put one in.
It's been a rough week. My name is Tia. I'm also a junior. I'm majoring in political science, and I'm also calling from Ann Arbor. All right. Let's go in order. Jane, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jane. I'm a sophomore in high school, and I'm calling from Collierville, Tennessee.
Angie, you want to go?
Yeah, my name is Angie. I am a freshman studying political science, and I am calling from Knoxville, Tennessee.
Are you two siblings?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm Mustafa. I'm a sophomore here at the university. I'm studying biophysics and computer science. And I'm calling from Ann Arbor.
Awesome.
Yara.
Hi, I'm Yara Khalil. I'm an 8th grader from West Carville Middle. I'm studying 8th grade, and I'm calling from Carville.
Wait, that's a good one. For anyone who's not in college, we should just go with I'm studying 8th grade. That's so good. All right. Okay, so today's topic, as you guys know, is about legalizing for safety. So, like, a lot of the time we legalize certain practices because we think, or like a lot of people argue that we should. Oh, okay. A lot of people argue that we should legalize certain things because they'll make things safer in the end. So, what are you guys' initial thoughts on this, and like, what kind of stuff does come to mind when you think of legalizing for safety?
I definitely think that it's like it would benefit, like legalizing, like. I wouldn't say legalizing, but I would say like maybe decriminalizing drug use, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It would definitely help because you, like, I don't know, you give more opportunity to like for rehabilitation, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying, but I don't know, but yeah, so I think that I think that it's good. I'm just gonna keep it at that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like the reason why we came up with this topic is in the first place is because like recently Wisconsin like made it legal to possess any drug, even if it's like cocaine or heroin. So that like just shocked me because clearly that's not the case for every other state. So
Yeah.
I don't think I understand it because,
what do you mean?
like, why are they legalizing people carrying drugs? So people, like, less people are in jail for drug?
Yeah, I think that is like the
Is that the only reason?
because like a lot of people are calling for like the decriminalization of all practices that are like non-violent. So people or like people on the very far end of the spectrum will say that we should decriminalize everything that's nonviolent. So outside of everything violent, then you should do anything you want.
Wait, can you get arrested if like you have drugs but like your intent is to sell? Like if you're like a dealer or something?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure like it's just possession, so
Yeah.
you would
But
still
like is there like a limit for possession? Because like if you possess like a pound of cocaine, that's sus.
That's sus.
Like I don't know.
So,
Like it's different from
I don't-
owning like a gram or something.
Yes, it is completely
Well,
different.
like, I know, but I'm saying like it was criminal.
$500 right over there.
But yeah, call a middleman.
Okay, yeah, Tia's gonna look it up now.
I've actually been seeing way more like cartel videos. Like,
Are you on TikTok? I have seen so many.
Guys.
Oh.
but I think like
Just go to TikTok.
legalization for safety is like, sure, like the end effects are, justifiable. You see like in Portugal where they have decriminalized all drugs, like, their drug use is down. Their, the crimes related to drugs is also down.
Yeah.
But like, is it morally right to use drugs? And if it's not morally right to use drugs, should a government legalize something that's not morally correct?
Yeah.
So I think that's what it's down to is like, even if the ends do justify the means, like, are we like as a society okay with legalizing something that may be immorally incorrect just because it produces better outcomes?
That's a super good question. Like, what do you think would make doing drugs immoral, though? Like, what are your...
I'm not saying that doing drugs is immoral. I'm saying,
like, what might be a reason why?
I guess, I mean, you could say it's harmful for yourself. So like, I remember like seeing something that Plato wrote. He was like, the best of a man is one who always, takes care of himself physically.
Right.
So if you're doing something that, that's physically harmful to yourself, is that a moral thing to do? Like on a like person to person basis, not on the societal level.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think another thing to consider with like the Portugal thing also is like, just because it works in certain countries does not mean that it will work in the United States, or maybe it will work in Wisconsin, but like there are probably, I'm assuming, states or like areas of the world where legalizing a drug would just end up making things a lot worse.
Because like we're gonna talk about this like in our other consideration section, but like if we consider, for example, the opioid crisis in the United States, like these are legal drugs that people are still abusing. This isn't really like, even if we're talking about it from a public health standpoint, this allows us to like maybe reach out to people who are suffering from addiction without like them fearing being like criminalized. It's still not doing that much because like the opioid like crisis is not a matter of like whether these drugs are legal or not.
Yeah.
Wait.
Especially. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, my bad.
No, really go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, so are we taking like a moral standpoint from this argument or like health?
Both. We can talk about everything surrounding it. I know sometimes we have meetings where we're like, don't talk about the law at all, but like this is not one of them. Yeah. Okay.
I was also gonna say, like in Portugal, like they didn't just decriminalize the drug. So that's a really good point, because they also like instilled way more laws, like putting more, like clinics, like drug specifically made like for people with drug abuse. So good point.
That's awesome. All right, so I just put up a bunch of questions here. So like our broad question that we're trying to answer here is like, to what extent should be legal? Oh, should we? Okay. I don't even understand my own typo. So like, I think this is most well discussed like under the umbrella of like drugs, prostitution, and like abortion. Those are like the three things that come to mind for me, at least. I don't know if you guys can come up with any other examples of things that might be safer if we legalize them.
Poaching.
Okay, that's fair. I guess some might argue that like we shouldn't poach at all, or we shouldn't.
Yeah, I know some places in like in Kenya they have legal poaching because it's somehow safer or something.
Yeah, you can like,
Interesting.
regulate it, I guess.
Yeah.
Wait, so like the three things, or like the things that are like highly debated on if they should be illegal or legal, and like what they do for safety.
Kind of like that. Yeah.
What about guns? That one's highly debated, and like if it ends up making society safer or less safe.
That could be something.
Right.
That's probably a different topic we're gonna have.
I think it's that one is like ever so slightly different because like guns are already legalized, and we don't legalize them for the sake of safety, really.
Yeah.
Like, it's more we legalize guns for the sake of freedom. I feel like.
Yes, and
not
it's like,
really for safety.
Yeah.
But then why don't we legalize drugs for the sake of freedom?
Well, that is an argument. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure plenty of people who do use drugs think that like they should have the freedom to do so.
Like, why I would say maybe guns we're gonna like talk about in a different topic is because like it runs into like amendments and stuff like that. Like, can you roll back something that already a protection that already exists?
Yeah.
Okay.
It could also have some like I also thought of like illegal immigration. Like, I don't know. I feel like legalizing it or not, like obviously there is like the legal, like with like the like for example like the like legal US policy or whatever, but like if an immigrant is not like granted a green card or whatever and they're here to like declare asylum or whatever, like they're stopped at the border before they can even like seek like a court so that they can like file for it. And that's just like it just like I don't know, it makes it less safe for people who are just trying to like seek asylum.
Yeah, but I think this is like a little bit different also in the sense that like immigration itself is not an actual like danger. So like we're not like immigrants coming to the US is not the dangerous thing that we should legalize to make.
Yeah, I know it's like it's more about like the illegal and it's the illegality of it, and it's also like, you know, because they're like breaking the law or whatever, they're like
It's also like why we're talking about drugs, prostitution, and abortion is that there are so many people who like fundamentally disagree with the morality of these actions.
Yeah.
But like
the morality of immigration isn't really up to debate. Like no one finds it morally reprehensible.
Yeah, that's like, what I'm saying.
Like with these practices, some people might say, yes, we should make them legal, even though we do not, we still condemn this practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to make it safe, yeah.
All right, so I just want to pause for a second because like a couple people came. So hi Chen and
Megan.
Megan should be here too.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
Hi Megan, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
Good. We have some new people here today that you have not met before. So we have Mustafa, we have Chen, and we have Zhu.
Cool. Nice to meet you guys. I'm Megan.
Nice to meet you.
All right, awesome. It's so cool to have like people meet each other finally. It's so fun. Okay, so the first question I put up on the slides is like, why do we make certain practices illegal and legal? So I guess like the first consideration is like, is this like Mustafa was saying before, like is this a moral act or not? And that can also be something that we use to determine whether or not it should be legal or not. Any other things? So like obviously another thing might be we should legalize it even though it's immoral because it will make the immoral practice safer.
is it kind of just like a utilitarian type of thing where it's like we might make something legal because it produces like the greatest benefit to, or like reduces harm to the greatest number of people.
Okay.
And vice versa. If we
Can you give me an example?
like kind of like we're talking about with like some things are immoral and they harm people, like murder, for example. So we make that illegal.
Yeah.
But like we might consider like doing drugs immoral, but then it's like it does less harm if we make it legal than if we make it illegal. So therefore,
Right.
yeah.
I think it's like really hard to determine whether legalizing drugs will be good because like you can't really say like, oh, X amount of people will die from drug overdose if we legalize this, or like X amount of people will die if we don't legalize it. Like it's really hard to make that kind of prediction because you can't really feel like human behavior like as a whole is really hard to predict, especially like large groups.
Isn't there the argument with like legalizing
Mhm.
or decriminalizing drugs in that it helps? I don't know about the economy, but like it gets less people put in prison and more people put in rehabilitation if like it was made free. So like those people wouldn't have to be like paid for in as a like the prison system. So that could like drastically reduce it.
But
Yeah,
rehab is also costly.
yeah,
You gotta
But they still contribute to society afterwards a lot easier because they can still have like a kind of like a place in society still because prison kind of strips that away from you.
yeah. So it's kind of just like reallocating funds essentially. So number two, like how true is it that legalization makes practices safer? Like, we can talk about each of the things like separately, I guess. So like, do you think legalizing abortion would make abortions safer? I would say definitely yes for that one.
Yes,
Yeah, for sure.
definitely.
I think not just legalization, but also increased accessibility.
Yes, I agree.
Red states, you'll see that it is legal. I mean, but like one clinic per 1 million people obviously won't be enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, but like yeah, just for sure. But legalization for abortion makes it safer. But like, you just need to make sure that it's accessible as well.
Yeah,
yeah.
because it's also like a medical procedure. You need people who are, like qualified to do it.
I feel like making abortion like super inaccessible is like essentially just like a fake illegalization of
That's
the
pseudo.
abortion essentially. So yeah, that's definitely just like a loophole for them to keep people from doing something because it doesn't align with their values.
There's like wasn't there like in Alabama where it was like a lot of Planned Parenthood places were like shut down or whatever, which is like not only are they just for like helping women get access for abortions, they're for like other things that women need.
Yeah.
But so a lot of women I'm pretty sure I read an article about it, like they were getting unsafe procedures because they didn't have access to them.
Yeah.
So it was like a threat.
Because in a way it's like something you can't like just not get if you feel like you really need one. So you're pretty much forcing these people to turn to unsafe methods if you don't legalize it. So like does this same logic apply to like prostitution though or drugs?
I would say yes to a certain extent. Okay, I don't know how valid this is,
Mhm.
but I think that like since prostitution is illegal, I don't think that prostitutes have like the resources to like I think it'll make it safer for the prostitutes because there's a lot of violence accompanied with like like men and their toxic masculinity and whatnot, like being violent towards sex workers.
Mhm.
So I think that like you know legalizing like I'm just gonna say like legalizing prostitution would um the prostitutes would have like access to like seek help
Yeah.
without them being like penalized for being prostitutes, if that makes sense.
In a way though, couldn't you argue like the opposite? Like if you make it if you like increase the, what word am I looking for? Like if you make it even more illegal to be a prostitute, then like they wouldn't even exist in the first place. So why would they get harmed?
They would still exist, I think. Like it doesn't matter how would you illegalize it even more?
I like that was like not the way I wanted to phrase it. I just like can't come up with the words right now. But um like if you make the punishments like heavier for it, then like there's less incentive for people to take that risk of doing something illegal in order to like make money, right? So
I guess you probably need to like probably dig a little bit deeper. I mean, sometimes there are also root cause for why people actually go into this industry because I mean sometimes financial concerns and I mean I once read the article that sometimes like
mhm.
even the major participant of this are actually young teens who are facing either like house loans or tuition loans or whatever. They yeah they're facing very high financial pressure and actually it has more deeper society costs than you know simply a very bad intention anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chen. But if we if we legalize it, do we then encourage more people, more young people who with financial problems to pursue
Yeah, it does
prostitution
kind of send that message, yeah.
as a means
But
to?
that's the same as the drug argument. Like how come the drug argument how come the drug use like goes down whenever you legalized it in like Portugal or whatever? But it's like it's the same concept. Like it could go up, but it also could go down.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to like
I would say it is a political solution rather than just this kind of legislation stuff. Like, I mean, if you can address the young teens like their financial pressure in the first place, then I don't think anyone actually has any intention to go into the prostitution in the United States
Exactly.
without those sort of root cause. To be honest.
Yeah, so like what I was saying, I guess I don't even know if I fully agree with this. Actually, I don't think I do, but like by making the punishments for engaging in sex work more severe, like you're essentially deterring more people from taking the risk in the first place. So like even if they're under a lot of financial pressure, like it's not going to be as easy of a choice or like as easy of a thing to just like get into if it were like more harshly regulated.
yeah, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I guess with prostitution, is being a prostitute something that's moral? Is it ethical to be to because and you could argue that prostitution is the objectification of the self. You're literally putting a price on your body. Is that a moral thing to do to be a prostitute?
Yeah, I think this also, like, I know no one mentioned this, but like this also like kind of ties into like um organ markets and stuff. Like can you just like should we be able to like sell our organs to people, and like obviously it's like a thing on the black market, right? But like it's kind of like how much autonomy, bodily autonomy, do you actually have?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have that in Iran, legalized organ donors and no waiting lists. So there's definitely an argument for it.
Yeah. So like yeah, I think we're gonna have like an actual discussion just on that topic because I think it's super interesting. But yeah, I think it kind of parallels with what you were saying about.
Actually, I don't think like prostitution is remotely comparable to organ selling because, to be honest, I don't see
You don't need
uh,
to.
prostitution actually just caters to people's worst impulse. It doesn't do any contribution at all. Like, I mean, organ selling. Sometimes you might be selling it to someone who really needs it, and so actually, I don't see prostitution has any kind of
Something to
positive side.
But I think it boils down to like the principle of autonomy over your own body. So if you take abortion to its most extreme argument, pro choice, my body my choice, does that also extend to organ donation of your own body, and or not organ donation, organ selling and
Yeah.
prostitution? You could argue yeah, but you could also argue no, because I don't know.
Because
I would definitely agree. Like, oh, go ahead, Lucia. My bad.
I was just gonna say, like, once you add like the selling part of it, like obviously just having sex with someone is like not an issue, and just like donating your organ to someone is not an issue. But if you are doing it for money, it kind of like adds a level of, are you only doing this because you want the money? And if so, like, then that means that we're kind of just like forcing you into doing this action that you don't actually want to do in order, because we want to like take advantage of the fact that you are under financial stress, for example.
Yes, but like,
I think if they're go again. I'm so sorry.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say if they're willing to pay, there shouldn't be anything wrong with it.
I was also gonna say, like, maybe this is too much of a Marxist standpoint, but like, isn't that what you do with any type of profession anyway?
I was gonna say that.
Yeah. So this is like the difference between like a job and like selling your body parts, though, is like that's your body.
Well, what about selling your like?
Actually, I think the
That's why I'm saying it's like a parallel there,
Yeah.
and not with like a. It's like prostitution is different from a normal job in that you're not just like. It's like more involved, just like a kidney selling thing would be.
But so like art.
This will
What
make
about like modeling? Like you.
I would argue, or I would contest on that a little bit. Like, I mean, if you firstly let's talk about intention. Like, if you're doing a normal job, actually you are doing. I mean, for most people, they're probably doing it out of their interest or their passion or whatever. But actually, I mean, every people need this financial motives to complete their job to stay productive. That's the way I see what a moral job should be. And if you think about prostitution, actually, to be honest, many people fall into this category not because they have any original motivation. I mean, especially for the prostitutes who actually go into this profession, they didn't have any original intention like to perform this job. They are simply for that financial motive. And actually, and this job is in and by itself like for money. So
yeah.
I don't think like it's actually like other category.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying it also parallels with like selling organs, because like no one is going to turn to that unless they need the money for it, right? Like I don't think any of us would just like sell our organs unless like we like really needed the money for it. And I think that's why there's a parallel between the two.
Okay, let's say then money was not an issue. Let's say everyone on this planet was rich.
Yeah.
Well, is it then okay to legalize prostitution? Just to, like, say a woman wants, because if you think about it, I mean, porn, it's basically just prostitution with a camera. I mean, people are getting paid and they're just filming it and putting it online. But so if money is taken out of the equation and if someone wants to legalize all drugs or become a prostitute, is it then moral or ethical to legalize it?
I would think so, though I don't see what the like incentive.
But they're like, I think I would agree with what you're saying here. Like, yeah, once that exploitation aspect is taken out of it, or like the pressing need to do something, you're just doing it because you want to do it.
Yeah.
Then I don't really see why we'd have a reason to oppose it.
Yeah, because then once you take the money out of the situation, it essentially just becomes like sex.
A hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or just.
So I think, yeah, in that case, then there wouldn't be anything wrong with it. And same with like the organ selling stuff. Like,
if you're donating organs, because like.
Yeah, obviously no one's gonna be opposed to that. Like, that's clearly just you being a nice person. Whereas like if you're doing it for money, it's just like a desperation type thing.
So, but then with prostitution, especially, if it's like okay to do it if you're really rich and not okay to do it when you're really poor, is that kind of fair? Because that's like a different standard.
So like I don't actually think that like I'm not saying
yeah for sure, like this is all like I probably don't believe half the stuff that I'm saying right now.
Yeah, I see what you mean though. Like it's not necessarily like I don't think poor people wanting to be prostitutes is like an immoral thing. It's like the fact that the practice exists is the immoral thing. Like it's not on the individual people, like that's clearly not their fault, right? So like the government like needs to step in that case because like we want to keep them from needing to turn to that, right? Whereas like
There is like a
go ahead, Angie.
no, I was just gonna say I think there is like a different set of standards for it depending on like in this aspect we're talking about like financially, right? If you need the money or whatever, if you're doing it because you need it.
Yeah.
Or like I mean there's like if we go back to like the porn where we're comparing like prostitution to porn, there's like unethical porn. And then there's like the porn where it's like, okay, they're voluntarily doing it. Like you know that it's fine. So like they're not being exploited. And I think yeah, that does definitely have like if you're being exploited then it's immoral, I think.
Yeah. That's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, so I do think that it would be immoral. Like it's the wording of it makes it sound so bad when I say like it's immoral if a poor person does it because they need to, but because like they shouldn't.
They're not putting like judgment on the poor people.
Yeah, I know, but like even saying it just like that, I don't know.
I think that with kind of organ buying and selling, because like not donations, that's a different story. I think that's moral. But I'm saying like selling them for money, because in my head I'd think of a situation where like a rich man who smoked all his life, right, and his lungs are obviously weak from it, so he basically did it to himself, and a little child who was born with like cystic fibrosis, for example, where they need a new set of lungs and they didn't ask for it, but the rich man obviously can afford them, so he buys a set of lungs. I don't think that's very moral.
Yeah, that's an awesome point to make. Like, just making anything a market just like increases the yeah. That's a super good point.
So then, is it okay then for governments to legalize stuff that is immoral if the ends justify the means? Also, should we differentiate between legalize and decriminalization? Like instead of maybe playing out legalization, everything, we just decriminalize it and we don't charge people, but it's still a crime, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's like a weird line though, because it's like technically if you decriminalize something, you're essentially like removing all like the incentive to not do that thing.
But it's like I know I was reading something about decriminalizing prostitution for the prostitute. So like if you're being harmed by your clients, you can just go to the police.
Yeah.
Your client can still be prosecuted, but you are protected because you're just like
yeah.
Yeah.
If it's in the interest of like the prostitutes, for example, like I don't think that's the issue. Like I think what I'm asking when I ask this is more like the entire practice, like whether it should exist or not, or like whether we should allow it to exist. So, wait, what was your other question?
It was, should then we, should governments be allowed to legalize things that we view as immoral if the ends justify the means?
Yes. That's a super good question. So, like, should immoral things be legal? I think that's a super interesting thing to say because a lot of people equate the law with moral. So it's super. Oh, Jess is here too.
Oh, and that brings up another point. Like, so if we're then seeing like what is morality, like how are we going to define that? Because if we're going to view the law as the ultimate source of morality, that means everyone's going to have to agree on a code of morality. So that's like the meaning of life. You know, like who gets to decide that?
Yeah, it's like really weird because in a way I think a lot of people accept that everyone like has their own set of morals, right? But then like the law is supposed to be a way for us to like control for that, right? So it's kind of confusing. Like, what really is the purpose of law in the end, then, do you guys think?
I mean,
I think it's just the lowest bar. I mean, it's not like setting a moral guideline for a society. That's not the job of law. That's probably religious leader or whatever. But
Yeah.
I mean, the job of the law is just to the gatekeeper.
Yeah, I would say it's just a means of protection rather than like morality, because I was having a conversation with, this was a while ago, but I was having a conversation with a bunch of like, I forgot what religious affiliation, but they looked Amish. And they were like really, really hardcore Christians. And they were just like, you know, what is morality or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was like answering, I was like, dude, it's not, you can't like label something as moral or immoral because like everyone has like their own set and he was like, you're thinking of this ideally though, like idealistically though. God. And I was like, okay, I'm out of here. But like everyone just has like different sets of morals, so the law cannot like possibly cover each one, which means that it would be like invalid to assume.
So like Chen was saying, it's like the lowest bar maybe.
Yeah.
So like
It's also like
we should kind of be able to agree on like certain things.
There's some things that like almost everyone can agree are immoral, such as like murder or theft or something. Like,
but some people don't think that.
Yeah, I don't think to a certain extent theft is not that bad.
Depends who you're stealing from.
Yeah.
Exactly. Hobby Lobby.
Also,
let's not say that.
Let's not say that. This is recorded. What's it called? What did I want to say? There's like, you have morality, but also I think law is based on the morals that are most conducive to the functioning of a society. So like, you can't really have a community or a functional community if everyone is just like killing each other or.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point, Taya. So I think like there are two like basically schools of thought, you know, on why you need law. You know, like first you have, you know, like Hobbes, and he says like without law, you know, human nature chaotic, like we're all going to kill each other, and that's why we need law to impose order. And then you have Locke, and he says we need law because humans are, you know, naturally good, or not like they're naturally, you know, just okay. And then, but the law is necessary to impose order on those who do bad things. So who's right? Like what is like the basis of human nature? Like, are we just savages underneath, or are we just chill? Like, but we need to punish the
We actually did have a human nature discussion, and I think we might like have another one.
Yeah, we do, because like this does tie into it.
Wait, I forgot what I was gonna say.
Society, Hobbes, Locke.
Oh yeah, like I think Angie mentioned this before, that like government exists as like a way to protect us, right? So maybe it doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with what our nature is. Like, I guess it maybe implies that we don't know how to protect ourselves, which I think is pretty accurate.
Actually,
so, like,
you go ahead.
So yeah, I feel like that might be a good way of putting it, just because that in that case it would allow us to make like immoral things legal, because there are plenty of people who think abortion is immoral, right? So the only like way we could legalize it then would be like taking a stance that says, oh, we can legalize immoral things even if they're immoral, because we can use it to protect certain groups.
Yeah, and I just want to add on to Mustafa's opinion a little bit. Like, he actually brought up a very interesting point, like whether to also actually it opened up my mind. Like, originally I'm just considering like people probably could agree on some basic moral guidelines, but his point also tell me that actually we also need to check our worst impulses, and that is also true. That law should also protect what people are the least likely to feel empathy about. For example, for the murderers, the law still granted them due procedures, and to probably to defend himself and to petition for a lower punishment. And yeah, that I think that's another function of the law, which is to protect those who are actually that people doesn't feel that probably people wouldn't feel empathy about in a normal condition.
Yeah.
That's my
Yeah, minority rights basically.
Wait, you guys bring some other stuff up. I just want.
I was gonna say I am about to leave actually. So goodbye everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Hi, Angie. Thank you for coming. I'm also leaving now, so have a good discussion, guys.
Oh,
Bye. Good luck on your
Hey,
physics.
good luck on physics. I know it's gonna be tough. So
Thanks.
1 sec, y'all.
Like most commonly legalized.
Mm-hmm. But if we're saying that, like, we're legalizing it for the safety of the people who are addicted to these drugs, why would it make a difference between marijuana and cocaine? Shouldn't we be trying to, like, I don't know, help people out?
Like
Like, where
with
do we draw the
decriminalization. Well,
Uh-huh.
I think that most drugs, I like I don't know, I haven't done enough research to find out which ones like need to be illegal, but I
Mhm.
think most of them at least should be decriminalized, but some should be legalized.
Mm-hmm. Anyone have
'Cause
any other opinions on that?
I guess we all lack this medical knowledge, so probably need a little background knowledge to develop some opinions.
I think I agree with what Yara is saying. I think fentanyl versus marijuana, because fentanyl is more likely to kill someone faster, especially someone who doesn't have a medical knowledge of what it's doing to you. I would prefer if it was harder for them to access it.
So you do think that making it illegal, like, does making it illegal have to necessarily make it harder to access, or does making it legal necessarily have to make it easier to access? Like, we could prevent, I don't know if there's a possibility that we could prevent a market from being formed for something that is legal. Like, could that give the government an opportunity to just like regulate how much fentanyl is produced and where it goes? Because it kind of already does that.
That's if demand exists.
I mean, if demand is there, it's there.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think you can prevent a market from being formed, but I don't know, with the specific example of fentanyl, just like how quickly it can kill you and like how little of a dose it takes, I don't know if you can really regulate its use. Because it'll kill you quite quickly. But I do understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So do you think like legalization is more effective for, let's just say, drugs for which you need a higher dose, or more continuous use for a negative effect to take hold on the user?
I think so, yeah.
but then like who gets to decide that? Like what dosage is too high and what dosage is too little? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
And if someone gets to decide, how do we know that they're making the right choice?
Probably consensus of medical professionals, I guess.
Nobody listens to medical professionals' consensus these days.
Uh,
You're right. You have a point.
There's also like other considerations we want to take into account, such as like this could have different effects on like in different countries, kind of like the drug tourism we have right now in like Portugal, as you mentioned, or like Amsterdam, not just for, or even like Vegas for prostitution, things like that. Like you have people going to certain places just so they could like enjoy the legality of the thing they wanted to do in the first place. Like, what do you guys think about that? Is that a reason why we should like reconsider legalizing something? it's hard to be accountable for people who are not within your own population, really. Plus, it's like a lot of people are saying like legalization, yes, it's good because you can have like you can have drugs be produced at like less diluted with like other bad drugs, or just like regulated for lighter doses, stuff like that. But unsafe versions could remain. Like black markets could stay because dealers are just going to find it easier if they avoid the taxes of the government and they just like offer their drugs at lower prices.
Yeah, that's a
How
good
do you
point.
think that's like something we could fix?
I'm not sure it can be fixable. I mean, unless you make it. The reason black markets exist is because the product that they're selling isn't accessible. So the only real reason to fix it is to make it even more accessible. So, and is it, I don't know, is it acceptable to make drugs even more accessible than just complete, like accessible to the point where you can just buy them at the grocery store? I don't know, because I mean that's the natural progression of something. If you decriminalize it, and if you legalize it, then you should expect to buy it in a legal way and wherever. And some places will just pop up to that location. So, like, is it okay if like 10-year-olds go and buy cocaine? I mean, what's the difference between a 10-year-old and an adult? Yeah, sure, their mind is different, but morally, I mean, they're just two human beings nonetheless.
I'm not adding insights to your point. I'm just like your point just remind me of like a part of history. You know, the prohibition area where like the government legalized any source of alcoholic consumption, and it just give boost to the black market. It did nothing good. So actually, I think it's just like probably we need a kind of a survey to find out people's intention of the people's willingness of drug consumption. I mean, for American society, it's definitely not possible that you suddenly ban people from alcoholic consumption. That's doesn't make sense. But like, if you ban the drug, what is the cost of banning drugs? Like for the people, how much change? What kind of adjustment they need to make from their daily routines, and I believe that's something you need to consider.
Yeah, like prohibition absolutely was a total failure, and that's why it got like repealed. But that also raises an interesting question. Like alcohol is technically like if you suffer from alcoholism, you're addicted to a drug. But like is there a difference? Like you can even argue that like
It's
people
worse.
addicted to cigarettes are addicted to a drug. So like how should we regulate like access to heroin the same way we regulate access to cigarettes? Just presume that people will act on good faith and not buy it when they're underage, or just like I, I don't know. It's just such a difficult question.
Yeah, you make a good point with the alcohol, though. I mean, you can definitely argue that alcohol is more dangerous than
Yeah.
marijuana for sure. And then, but alcohol is legal. And I think that has to do, with the culture of alcohol and the culture of marijuana. Marijuana is seen, it's seen as illegal, so it becomes illegal in the mind. But alcohol is the opposite. It's legal, so it becomes okay to do.
Mhm.
But, I mean, I don't know.
And like alcohol has been legal for a really long time, but alcoholism still exists. But you also have so many people just using alcohol for social functions, just casually not drinking too much. Like, are we just gonna have to live with that fact that there are people who are just gonna take it to the extreme and people who are just gonna use it like moderately?
I think part of it has to do with like the same point that I brought up earlier, because it is like there's a higher margin of error or lower margin of error, whatever it is that you say, like when it's not as easy to mess something up, because people can use alcohol for social functions and be completely fine because it won't kill you at that dose. But of course, there will always be people who take it too far.
Mhm.
So I don't know if we can look at, you were comparing earlier heroin and alcohol or cigarettes. I don't think we can do the same thing with more dangerous drugs.
Yeah. That's definitely a good point.
So then would a completely moral society not use any type of drug and not use any alcohol and not smoke at all? Because if
That's
we agree that these things are
wrong, I think alcoholic culture is not necessarily evil. And actually, the reason why it was once banned is because, like, 100 years ago, America is still a deeply religious society, I guess. And right now, like, it's not that true. But I mean, right now, the overall society reception of drug is still very negative. But probably as time goes on, more and more people will find it more acceptable. And probably as long as people are informed with more concrete medical researches, like probably they're not that, I mean, not that bad, and this kind of phenomenon will not be fashionable. It's unlikely to be unfashionable. Then I believe more and more people probably will lower their bar and come to accept it. Maybe.
Sure, I guess like with alcohol culture that yeah, it itself, you definitely argue that not all aspects of it is immoral, but like in a perfect society, one that every single person, is infallible, they make no mistakes whatsoever. Everything they do is moral. Do they take drugs? Do they do alcohol?
I guess so. They will take, but I don't know, like in a perfect society, what is amount you would expect of this sort of consumption. But I guess this culture will exist peacefully with probably its opponents in this culture, in the whole society, I guess.
Can you even really put a moral judgment or value on the use of a substance? Like, I feel like when we consider addiction as something immoral, it's mostly tied to like our opinions of greed or gluttony, just like things that we think like don't use too much of something, be able to control yourself. That's the moral aspect. I wouldn't think that like the drug or yeah, the substance itself has any moral judgment or value. It's just like how does the person use it?
For me, it's not like just how the person uses it. It's like if we know that this thing is bad for you and you take it, does that make you like so you purposefully now are hurting your body? Does that make you a bad person?
I don't know if it does make us a bad person. We were just talking about like if addiction is inherently immoral. Because think about it, like we all eat sugar every day. Like we know how bad sugar is for us. We know like the effects it can have on our body. I think Tia was absolutely right in saying that we view addiction as immoral because of like our views on greed and whatnot. But I think one of the only times when addiction can truly be immoral is when it starts affecting the way that you treat others. Because if you're just doing it to yourself, I don't know if we can say that that itself is immoral. But like when you start affecting others negatively because of your addiction, then we can start to look at that.
Actually, I want to like contest on that a little bit. Like, if you're just doing harm to yourself, you're probably not doing good to any people else, to everyone else. Then I still consider it being immoral because if you're doing bad to yourself and you're knowingly doing bad and you know that there's no way to get out of it, then actually you're just undermining your functionality to the society, and probably that will make you more relying on others' assistance to make your own subsistence, to make your own living, and that's also kind of immoral, in my opinion. So being addictive, in part, it's kind of, I believe it's still kind of a moral thing, but as long as I mean, sometimes people might get high with drugs or alcohol sometimes just to, to reduce some bad emotions, to relieve depression sometimes. And that is totally acceptable because sometimes probably it works well with some people to trying to tackle those negative emotions. And probably make themselves more productive in the future. But overall, I think being addicted is immoral.
You were talking about like the burden on other people and how that's immoral, but I think that like raises some questions because a lot of people consider addiction like a mental illness, which is just a disability like any other. I don't think we can really say that someone is immoral for demanding more support of the society they're in or like contributing less because that would like raise some questions about are you less valuable if you are like if you suffer from a disability, which addiction is considered one.
I mean, if it is out of mental illness, it's understandable. Like, but if you are knowingly getting addicted, and I mean, if you have full ability to exercise restraint on yourself while you knowingly get addicted, then that is immoral. That's
Okay, so let's say, you have, a shot of heroin right over here. You take it. If you take it once, you're not gonna become addicted, but it's still gonna hurt your body. Is that a moral thing to do? Because I was thinking like kind of like what Chen was saying, like, and also kind of going off Jessica. If you doing that will hurt your body, which in turn could hurt society, which hurts other people. So is it like so? Just you could argue that just by simply taking that heroin one time, you're hurting other people. So then does that then? But you won't be addicted. You're not gonna develop an addiction. So does that become an immoral thing to do? Just taking that one drug once, but still being affected, is still affecting others.
if you're informed and you personally have that sort of judgment that if you take it, there is a very high likelihood that you can harm others, then I believe that is considered immoral. But if you're without that knowledge, for example, like a 5-year-old child, and he has no medical knowledge, and you found that curious, and he just take a pill, I don't think that immoral. So that's
Right.
There's also like this kind of goes with our previous meeting about like free will versus biological determinism. Are you really in charge when you decide to take that first like dose? Because like I remember reading something. I feel like there were some studies done about some people just are naturally more likely to be addicted to things just because of their brain chemistry. So can we actually like place a moral value on this? I I don't know. Part of me does not think that like if you're addicted, you're just you're just ill. Like you need some help. You
Yeah,
need
I agree. I agree. If you're addicted, obviously, at that point, you have an illness that needs to be treated. But
yeah.
those previous steps leading up to your addiction, some of them for sure were partly in your control. So
Mhm.
is it fair then to say, those things that you did were wrong, that you should not have done them? And if then they are wrong, that means they're obviously immoral.
I believe it's kind of contingent on to what extent you are in control of yourself. You are totally in control of yourself, and you are simply doing that to be cool or whatever, and you are fully informed that you can get addicted, and once you get addicted, you can be easily harmful for other people. Then, in this case, in this scenario, then you are totally immoral. That's what I'm trying to argue.
Mhm.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
To power off your iPhone.
Also, like going back to the should we legalize things or should we like make them illegal? I want to bring up that point I made again about like how people can still harm themselves with legal drugs or substances that we don't even consider like inherently addictive.
Yeah, like Jessica was saying with sugar. I mean, sugar
Yeah.
causes diabetes and diabetes. So like, is eating bad, unhealthy food, is that immoral? Is it, is because you're putting your life at risk? And not only then, like say you rely, on government subsidized healthcare, then you're having more people pay for your healthcare because of actions that you made. So I don't know. Would that then is eating a lot of fast food, not a lot of, but is making bad eating choices when you had other choices immoral? I don't
I
know.
think I kind of think that it depends on how much restrictions you need to place on your freedom of will. I agree that actually people's free will is kind of their fundamental value, but just think about it. Like, it's really hard for some people to get rid of, to not to try those unhealthy food. And also, this topic is very is I don't think there are abundant health informed instructions on what kind of food is considered unhealthy, what kind of food is considered healthy, and to adjust your uh, to adjust your diet is kind of, I mean, that's a very high burden on your on your personal freedom. So that's why I think like eating unhealthy food is definitely is not, I wouldn't say that it's moral, but it's definitely not immoral. But as far as as far as it, if you trying to put some self restraint, not to try some drugs, not to try extremely addictive drugs, it's definitely a much easier thing to do than not to try unhealthy food. So I mean, you didn't need to sacrifice too much of your personal freedom to not harming others' freedom, to not harming others' right, to not placing burden to society. And
I
in
mean,
that way, if you can do it, then why not? That's it.
you could argue that like obesity, someone who's so morbidly obese they can't like continue to work or they must like be dependent on a family member. Is that not the same as the effects that an addict goes through? They're just addicted to like
As
food.
far, uh, as
Yeah.
far as I know, like obesity sometimes are very highly sometimes are very high. It is a genetic thing as far as I see it. I'm sorry, I'm not saying it's a totally genetic thing, but nature definitely has has a very high, has a very significant determination in whether people become or become. I'm sorry, I'm kind of wrong of words right now. Like, actually, it's more determined by your nature than nurture sometimes. As far as I know, like some uh as I grow up, I just noticed that some people find it's really hard to, you know, to keep their body shape and whatever.
Mhm.
And can you find it much harder than others to do that? So as far as I see it, it totally depends on how much restrictions you need to place on. I mean, to what extent does all these restrictions affect your exercise or exercise of your personal freedom? For example, I mean, eating unhealthy food, eating junk food. This is more like, this definitely plays a higher burden on most people than simply than not to take a drug. So I mean, it's all. I'm sorry, you guys can go on. I'm kind of.
That's fine.
You actually raised like an interesting point, and I wanted to kind of push back against something Mustafa said earlier about how if you knew that trying that first dose of a drug would harm your body, even if you did not get addicted, is it inherently immoral to do that? If you knew that trying that first, like let's say Big Mac or something.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about. I was saying, yeah. So, is it then immoral just to eat fast food? Because and we see that sometimes it is. Sometimes lawmakers, like in California, they ban those really big sugary drinks, you
Mhm.
know, because it's bad for you. So that's kind of like, so should those things be legalized? Should those big fast food sugary drinks be legalized? I don't know, because I don't know.
Yeah. It's like hard to say, especially because like fast food is such a normalized part of our culture, kind of like alcohol or cigarettes for that matter, that we don't feel like, oh, this is something that the government needs to step in and make illegal. But that's kind of a bias that we suffer from.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Those things, you know, were illegal, you know, we'd have very different opinions on whether we should legalize them, because you could argue that eating a diet only of fast food is just as bad as being addicted to alcohol, but yet one is legal and one is illegal. So there's obviously some level of hypocrisy there. So do we legalize both, or do we illegalize both? So
What do you think is safer, legalizing both or illegalizing both?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. It's pretty hard to say. And like, is it just about just flipping the situation? Like, what is the solution to the opioid crisis? Do we just make opioids inaccessible or illegal? That doesn't really seem right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Mustafa actually raised a very interesting point. Like, I think you said that California state is trying to ban those sugary drinks. And actually, I think that's an interesting point. It's an insight that how we can tackle the opioid crisis problems, that you hold tough measures against the selling side. I mean, it's much easier for people not to sell something than people not to buy something. So I believe like if we're trying to make selling something more costly, then it can be more effective. Because I mean, for opioid crisis, this sort of things, they're more like demand driven. Then if like there are not actually many people who are willing to sell them, but there are definitely many people who are once get addicted, they're in demand of it. And if you just target at the selling side, then it might be more easier to get rid of this issue once and for all. Okay.
Yeah, could be.
But like,
that's why I believe that in America, like selling drugs are definitely you're facing much harsher punishment than those who are trying to buy drugs or simply consume drugs.
definitely, but like when you were talking about like the ban on sugary drinks, sugary drinks, there's not really like a use out of them aside from just like pleasure, I guess, because it's like enjoyable to drink them. But like with opioids, like they have actual benefits. Like some people need to get like prescriptions, but it's just like the issue is just the abuse of the drugs and not the drugs themselves. So does that make it different?
I mean, there are different sort of selling. Like, if they want to sell it legally, then there are many channels they can go through with it. Like, probably use medical research informed those medical research informed channels, or go through the hospitals, whatever. But as far as I know, many people selling opioid, they're simply for financial motives. And if you really go to many developing nations, the people are selling them mostly just for money, and they're not actually doing it with any good intentions. And in that case, I don't see why we shouldn't ban them, why we shouldn't make that illegal.
I mean, we did at one point, in the 80s with the war on drugs, and, that just made the drugs more potent. And, it put way more people in prison. And now, there are lots of people in prison just for, doing drugs and selling them. And I know you're saying we're like only focus on the selling, but what if instead of we like take a more like cigarette approach? The government keeps on increasing taxes on cigarettes, so less and less people buy them. But those who like are actually really, really addicted, they'll find a way to buy them. And and then there was a bunch of basically propaganda PR, but for how bad cigarettes are for you, and why you should stop them. That's why you saw such a decrease in cigarettes. So would the best solution be legalize some things to an extent, but then continually tax them, so you have a financial incentive to have to in taking those activities?
That actually like brings up a good consideration, like that last one. Do you think a social response is more effective than a legal one? Like, we never made cigarettes illegal. We just kept like drilling it into people that like, oh, cigarettes are dangerous. Don't do that. That'll give you a bunch of like problems, lung cancer, throat cancer. Just don't do it. Like, there's so many ads I see all the time about just like the dangers of smoking cigarettes. It's also like just socially we make it hard like I don't know. I feel like in the US compared to where I grew up, it's like a lot harder for people to smoke like outdoors. You have to find like a little corner they designate for you. You can't smoke inside restaurants, things like that. So it kind of just like turns people away. Do you think that's more effective than illegalization?
I think so. Sometimes I think also. Wait, where did you grow up though?
Jordan.
Oh, nice, nice. I,
Yeah.
I've had a couple layovers there.
Nice.
I think also with cigarettes, I'm not sure, but my theory is also not just the dangers of cigarettes. But I think the government also kind of associated in our head that people who use cigarettes are poor and low class. So in order to avoid being poor and low class, you should stop doing cigarettes. And like that's nothing overt, but I think like whenever I see ads like and stuff like that, I feel like that's kind of like the undertone of the ad. So it's also kind of funny, like if you're if that social response is that an ethical social response, to make it seem that those who smoke cigarettes, are lower class, no.
Yeah, that also raises like the question, do the ends justify the means? Like, are you allowed to use questionable tactics? Like that could also have that's just relying on the bad view that people have of the lower classes, you know? It's just reinforcing it. Um, yeah, I honestly don't know. Like, can we even rely on social responses? Do we have time to wait for a good social response to form? And is this intentional?
Yeah.
Actually, as you mentioned about tactics, I want to like also give you a part of history like where I'm growing up, and I just leave it open for your judgment, like how you will the morality of this. I mean, I'm from China, and like originally, like maybe 100 years ago, Chinese is heavily plagued by this opioid crisis, and I mean, 1940s when the government found that this is very serious problems, and actually they found that the opioid was largely circulated among the richer class. I mean, for poor people, they don't normally have access to it, but there are just some rich people who actually has the money to purchase it, and it's suddenly like the government take a very harsh approach. They just like put death penalty for whoever probably possess more than 50 kilogram, more than 1 kilogram of opioid or whatever drugs that the government dictated. And then it proved to be very effective in tackling the drugs, but it caused a lot of unnecessary death that are executed by the government. So what's your, what is your judgment for that from a morality perspective?
I don't know.
I think it's also kind of social response in a way, because this social structure, like more richer people are consuming the opioid, then it makes it easier to make them easier to be targeted at, because it's not like a popular stuff among the it's a popular stuff among the elites, but it's not a popular stuff among like normal people. Then the government just executed those people in the richer class, and they found it very easy to do that. This also kind of a social response, but I mean, from morality standpoint, it's definitely very controversial. So, what do you guys make of it? I think it's also kind of about tactics of drug dealing.
It reminds me of what's happening in the Philippines, because that's basically what's happening over there. Duterte, he's basically killing everyone who does drugs, and he's getting results. But is that a moral thing to do? I don't know.
I don't think in Philippines they're getting results, because I mean, as far as I know, in Philippines, like many people who sell drugs they're also in financial sinkhole. Like they have very serious financial problems. That's why many poor people are selling drugs, are selling opioid, whatever. And as far as I know, like government tactics are not very effective in that situation. So, I mean, but what do you guys make of it? Like taking unnecessarily harsher uh, approach against drug selling, drug consuming, though achieving a seemingly optimistic result. So, what do you guys make of it?
I don't I don't quite like know because I feel like the dominant view of drug use and addiction in the West is like it's a public health crisis, it's a public health issue. That's why we're trying to decrease it. And for that reason, like it just seems odd to be harsh against people when we're also considering that they're ill. You know? It's just there's that dilemma. I don't really know how I feel about it because on the one hand it is effective, but on the other hand I don't think it's the only way. There must be some better way to do things.
Something I thought of was, so with the end goal of any of these policies, you know, whether really, really harsh or whether fully legal, the end goal, right, is to keep as fewer people to take drugs as possible, right? Like we want as few people to take drugs as possible. So that means if we do that, then we're under the assumption that these drugs in one way or another are bad for some reason. So does that change then our view on what we should do if like we're already all these ideas are based on the presumption that these drugs are bad? Like, does that mean if these drugs are bad, does that mean taking them is also bad?
I think that if drugs are bad, then you need to focus on like what kind of approach you are taking. If you are using evil to tackle evil, then that doesn't make you any that doesn't make you any like more moral than those who sell the drugs or those who consume the drugs. If you want to take approach, then you need to like I to be honest, I generally agree with a holistic social response approach. Like probably you need community education. You need more rehabilitation center instead of jails, and you need more education resources for people. And probably that also depends on like economic situation. Like if the society achieve more economic equality, I believe it might also have an indirect result in a reduce in drug consumption or selling. So I generally agree with a holistic social response.
All right, we're like running pretty close to the end of our time. This was such a good discussion. Thank you all so much for like being so energetic about it. It went like a lot better than we expected because this is like a pretty polarizing topic. It's hard to reconcile like our feelings toward about how like people who are addicted should be treated versus how do we actually get rid of this crisis. Um, so here are some announcements. We've made some changes to the meeting schedule. We're not going to be meeting next week for Thanksgiving, but the following week we're going to be talking about antinatalism, immoral births, and selective abortion. Um, the following week we're going to be talking about the experience machine, which is like dealing with the question of what does it mean to live well. And after that, we're going to have our Netflix party, which is our last meeting of the year. So if you have any suggestions for what you want to watch, just fill out this Google form over here. All right. Thank you all so much. Hope you have a good Thanksgiving break.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Tia. Bye.
Bye.